I'm here today with State Representative Brandon Neuman, who represented the 48th District from the years 2011 to 2017. The 48th District is in Washington County. Thank you for being with me here today.
Thanks for having me.
I wanted to start by asking you a little bit about your childhood and family life and your educational background and how that prepared you for public service.
Yeah, so growing up in Western Pennsylvania, you have a lot of blue-collar blood that flows through your veins, and it's where I went to Cam McMillan, it's a wrestling-heavy area. So I played football and I wrestled and I played baseball throughout my whole life. And I'm the youngest of four, so I have two older sisters and an older brother. My brother started playing sports, so then automatically I did. So I started at age 5 playing sports. And so that really helped me get a sense of community and learn leadership styles from my different coaches from Little League all the way to college football. I was able to really take some leadership styles from my coaches, the good, leave the bad, take the good, and the athletics and the academics. Cam McMillan had great teachers. Both my parents were very involved in all of our lives. So as a child, it was going to my sister's cheerleading, to my brother's football game, and then to my football game. So we were always busy and out in the community and just talking to people. And I'm the first one ever to get involved in politics. So I think being the youngest and having to force myself into things a lot probably really helped build a foundation for me to just go and talk to people and try to help them.
Sure. And was your family politically active?
No, my family never were involved in politics. And I knew I was interested, even through high school. I was always interested in, the mainstream politics, the presidential elections, those types of things. But nope, no one in my family's ever run for office or were ever involved.
So how'd you come to become a Democrat?
I think that's geographically and family. The majority of individual people that live in Washington County, when I became 18, they were all Democrats. Now we are notorious for crossing the line, crossing the aisle when it comes time to vote for who they think is the best. So they're true blue Democrats, especially on labor issues and making sure that people are treated fairly. But they are they're more conservative on fiscally responsible, I would say, and a little more socially conservative. So I think it was a matter of my upbringing, where I was from. Both of my grandparents were in the mill, in unions, so they knew the importance of the right to organize and things of that nature. So I think it was a combination of geographical location and my family.
Sure. Could you describe your career before you came to the House?
Yeah, so I started working at a pretty young age. I was this isn't really a career, but I started valet driving when I was like 16.
Okay.
And then became a banquet server, which was also a good way to get into politics. I went to the University of Richmond for undergrad, and I sought internships. One of them was with Tim Solobai, and I was actually going to go to the FBI, and I kind of did a little more research and decided that I wanted to go to law school instead. So I went to law school. While I was in law school, I worked for the Office of General Counsel, Department of Transportation mostly, and then I was hired by Robert Pearson Associates, a plaintiff's firm in Pittsburgh, right out of law school. And so I was only working for them. I passed the bar in July of '09. Took the bar July of '09, passed it October of '09, running for office January '10. So I was matter of circumstances and opportunity, but Robert Pearson Associates and Bob Pierce and the whole team's always been great to me, and that's where I'm still affiliated with them and do some legal work. And but that was my first job out of law school.
So what made you run for the House so quickly?
Timing and opportunity. So, I was 28, and the circumstances were Representative Tim Solobai at the time Senator Stout announced his retirement. Tim Solobai, my representative, announced he was going to run for state senate, left an open seat. And so I saw it as an opportunity, even though I was only 28, if somebody's in there, who knows if they'll be there for 10, 20, 30 years, and the next opportunity to actually run. And so my work, Bob Pierce was, he was politically active. He was Allegheny County Commissioner, and his son doesn't necessarily like politics, so he kind of lived vicariously through me, and it supported me 100%, because I had bills, student loans,
Sure.
those types of things, and so I couldn't do it without the support of my workplace. And so I talked to my family. There were a bunch of Democrats that were going to run, and I was probably not the chosen one originally, because I was a Democrat committee person, but other than that, I wasn't really involved. I wasn't the typical person to run for office. And so I started with probably about 2% name recognition, but that didn't hold me down, and we just decided that it was the right time for me, and I did not want to pass up. I would have regretted if I passed up the opportunity.
And you've touched on a little bit, but can you go into a little more detail about that first campaign, both the primary and the general?
So there's no handbook on what to do. So you had my predecessor, Tim Sullivan, was great, but he had his own state Senate race, and the first thing that you have to do is petitions. And so you go into a room of 300, 400, 500 people. I don't know anybody. And so we struggled to just get organized to get even the petitions filed. And it ended up that one Democrat stayed in the race, Bob Fisher, a longtime Democrat committee man. His wife was jury commissioner, so she had won countywide office. And so people were worried that, a 28-year-old kid that they called me versus, I believe he was probably 74 at the time, but at least a well-known name, they were worried that maybe I wouldn't, be able to pull this one off. So my friends and family, my girlfriend at the time, that is now my wife, she was still in pharmacy school. Both my parents, my sisters, my brother lived in Philadelphia at the time, so he didn't get to do too much. He probably wouldn't have done too much anyway. I think he's a registered independent, so I don't know what he would have done. But we knocked on thousands of doors, and I was a little bit different of a district before redistricting.
Sure.
So it was a little more rural than my current district, and a little more spread out. But we hammered through. We worked hard, and in the primary, I want to say I got 70% of the vote. In the general, a little tighter. It was a wave year, midterm, first term Barack Obama, which traditionally midterm of the president, the opposite party usually does pretty well, as we're seeing now. I mean, you saw Alabama went blue yesterday, which is unbelievable. But so it was a pretty clean race. I mean, there was some money spent. There were mailers and things of that nature, but my opponent and I, Cody Knotts, we didn't get into much negative campaigning. We kept it pretty clean, and it was both worked hard, and I was fortunate enough to pull it off.
Were there any campaigns besides your first that were especially memorable?
So the 2012 it was the first time that I was going to be unopposed. But then a Republican wanted to do a write-in on Election Day to try to get the nomination. And so that was very stressful just because of the unknown. So we ran a write-in campaign as well on the Republican side, and we were fortunate enough for him not to get, he wasn't even that close. But I got real sick. And I remember throwing up that evening, and I had first generation iPad, and I kept refreshing while I'm throwing up just to see how many write-ins there actually were.
Was it an illness, or were you nervous?
No, it was an illness, because I don't I'm pretty even keeled, I don't get nervous. My wife's like, God, you're crazy. I'm in the bathroom with this iPad. But it was an illness. I got the bug, 24-hour flu or something like that, and I was throwing up all night. But 2014, my opponent worked really hard. They didn't spend as much money, and I was happy about that, the other side. And so it was a good test to see how the people of the district really how they thought I was doing. Because once again, it was not a good year for Democrats. And I was able, my district, I might have been, Tim Murphy was unopposed, Tom Wolf lost my district to Tom Corbett, same in 2010. And so I had to outperform the top of the ticket every single time. And it was a good litmus test for me to see how I was doing. And I was able to, outperform most Democrats by over 25 points and get close to 60% of the vote, right around there. And so it was a good test. And we just, went back to people's porches and went to their doors and talked to them again. And so that's the kind of stuff that I really like to do, is to have some self-awareness and stay in touch with and connected to people on Main Street and Pike Street and College Street, and just go on their doors and see what they're at. Because Harrisburg is like fantasy land. Like, none of this stuff is real. The real stuff is happening on somebody's porch. And I feel like too many elected officials don't go back to the porch and focus on what's going on up here.
Sure. Do you recall how you felt on that first swearing-in day?
You're overwhelmed. So I just got engaged. So now my girlfriend, who stuck with me, so I met my wife October of 2009, then I'm running for office in January of 2010, and she stuck with me through my first campaign. And so I had just got engaged. The emotions run high. You're up here. It's overwhelming. It's the first time I was ever, I don't want to say it's the first time I was ever on the House floor, because I was there when I interned for Tim Sullivan. But it becomes officially official, and you are meeting everybody. Everybody is being really nice to you because they don't know you and they want to ingratiate themselves with you. I had my good friend David Tyler. We were riding up in the elevator together. I didn't know him at the time, my wife and I, and people thought that we were like interns or going to work, because I was 28 and I looked young. My wife was probably 25. She looked young, and so people thought I was staff and not a rep, and there weren't that many new Democrats that year. Sure. But on the Republican side, I got to meet them. Their class was pretty big, and we got along pretty well. But the first swearing in, you're overwhelmed. It's all surreal, and you just kind of go through the motions and take all the pictures that you can. And I was just so proud to be up here. And Tim Sullivan won as well, so we first state senate. So we were getting sworn in together, which is very nice.
Can you talk about your district, geography, people, the culture? Yeah,
my district's awesome. It's one of the few, when you look at districts, the outlines that make sense. There's not a crazy arm on my district that you would look at and looks radical. My district makes sense. Washington County in general is transformed over the last 20 years. We have turned into our townships, northern townships, North Strabane and Cecil and Peters Township have turned into bedroom communities for commuters to Pittsburgh and things of that nature that were farmland. And then we have South Point, where we have Fortune 500 companies that are headquartered in South Point. Natural gas. I always say we have energy, technology, medicine, and education, all on South Point Boulevard. We have our struggles. It seems like the boroughs and the third-class cities that were once thriving when the mills were open are struggling a little bit, but we're very fortunate because of our location. We have I-79, which is one of the major routes, and I-70 intersect in my legislative district. And so we have the benefit of great road infrastructure, proximity to Pittsburgh and an international airport. We have a lot of natural gas and natural resources that are being explored. So we are very fortunate in what we have, and the economy seems to be doing really well in my area. The level of education that kids are receiving at schools is phenomenal. I was very fortunate to to really jump in 2011 to start STEM education programs in our schools. Ken McMillan just announced yesterday, that's my alma mater, that they're going to be the first lighthouse school in Pennsylvania, really in the Northeast, which means that our students will be writing JavaScript codes by 3rd grade.
Oh, wow.
And they're coding, and we're very fortunate to have the school districts that we have, and the teachers and the passionate individuals in our communities to support our school districts. And now we have the jobs to keep the students after they graduate, to keep them there.
Sure.
My generation, a lot of them went to Charlotte, a lot of them went to Houston, a lot of them, and now that Western Pennsylvania has this gravitational pull on you, and the thing that will bring you back is a job. And so now we actually have those jobs to keep those kids that we are educating here. So hopefully we can continue to capitalize on the benefits that we have and not remain stagnant, but always forward thinking. But I think my district and Washington County in general has its struggles. I mean, we have the old river towns in the Mon Valley that need help. Now, I don't represent that area, but what's good for the goose is good for the ganders. We want that area to thrive. So hopefully we'll be able to get to the more outskirts of Washington County and make sure they're doing as well as my district is right now.
You talked a little bit about going to the porch and talking to your constituents. Were there challenges in keeping constituents informed of issues and what was happening in Harrisburg?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, most of the things we're doing in Harrisburg, people don't know about, and they're not controversial. I mean, 90% of the stuff. I break down our titles. In some ways, we're delegates, and in some ways, we're trustees. And we're trustees to the point where they entrust in us that the things that are non-controversial that we're doing, they just entrust in us. And delegates to the point where if you're in tune with your constituency, things that are a little bit more controversial, when you're talking about something like natural gas drilling, don't listen. You're not a trustee anymore, and listen to people in Fantasyland. Get on people's porches, talk to them. My constituency is fairly well educated based on our newspaper circulation and watching the news, but it's always a struggle to make sure that people are not just spewing talking points and actually understanding the issues. And that's why it's important for your senior affairs, for when you have time to talk to people, that not only first and foremost you listen to them, but you also are honest with them and explain to them what is actually going on from your perspective, and try to educate the community as much as possible.
Sure. So I wanted to shift a little bit and talk about some of the professional relationships that you developed here in Harrisburg. When you entered, you mentioned you were 28.
Yeah.
Was there anyone that became a mentor for you as you began your career?
So I had the benefit in 2006. I actually worked for the Office of General Counsel in the summer for the state police in Harrisburg.
Okay.
And so I got to meet, and I've known Tim Sullivan, so I interned for Tim, so I automatically have a mentor there that will help me. And then I got to meet Harry Readshaw and Paul Costa and John Sabatina and Bill Keller, Mike Carroll. So, I got to meet a lot of these. So it wasn't the first time I was meeting these folks. And the one advantage when you first get sworn in and being young is most of the reps treat you like they're your son, like I'm their son. And so there was with open arms on both sides of the aisle. They would help me work through issues. I would go talk to people like Harry Readshaw and Tim Solobai and Bill Keller. Bill Keller's from Philadelphia, but he's been in the institution long enough to help me through the process. And so they were great in treating me like a son and making sure that shielding me from things in Harrisburg and making sure that I understood the process and was someone that was part of the getting things done. So they were very helpful for me when I originally got there. And then you develop many more relationships after that. But when I originally got here, it was the original crew, I'll call them, that I knew that really helped me.
And was there anyone on the opposite side of the aisle that you developed maybe an unlikely friendship with, or?
Yeah, so Brian Cutler and I became really good friends. So he's from Lancaster County, and the reason is him and Ryan all met in 2010. Republicans won so many seats that they had to sit on our side of the aisle too. So Brian Cutler and Ryan Allment sat in front of me, and so I really got to know Brian to the point where I've gone to his summer picnic for his constituents and actually shot a Gatling gun there, which was really cool. Yeah, you know, I know his kids and his wife. Him and I, there are issues that we are on total opposite ends. Merit selection being one of them. A couple of other issues where him and I just battle. And then there's issues that him and I work together on. But the nice thing about relationships like that is nobody takes this stuff personal if you have that level of relationship. And so I can debate him and he can debate me, and at the end of the day, we're still friends.
Sure.
And he's an attorney as well. So you get used to that as an attorney. You know, if you're opposing counsel, you're representing your client, I'm representing mine. None of this is personal. And so Brian Cutler was one of the first on the other side of the aisle and it was just a matter of, he sat in front of me. Mm-hmm. And, you know, when you're on the other side of the aisle, sometimes you don't know how to even start a conversation. And so I am a very serious person, but I do like to joke around. And so we would, you know, you got the real conservative guys from Lancaster County, and I'm joking around with them and making them laugh. And so it was a good thing that Ryan Allment, now Senator Allment, and Brian Cutler, now Majority Whip, mm-hmm. We became pretty good friends.
That's great. Can you talk about your relationship with the media, both in maybe in your district, but also in Harrisburg?
Yeah, so I think it's always been pretty good. Coming as an outsider, technically, and someone that has always been a good government type of representative. People like Brad Bumstead here, you know, gravitated towards me because, you know, I don't take per diems and, you know, those types of things. So they gravitate towards me for good government type stuff. You know, I tried to introduce bills to try to end pay to play, like those types of things the media likes. So there was a natural fit there. And when I first got in my first term, I brought up a very controversial. It was a discharge resolution, but it was discharging a resolution to call for the investigation of Tom Corbett's handling of Jerry Sandusky. And so I'm a freshman legislator, and now it's
taking
like
on the governor.
And it's Jerry Sandusky. So it's like, so the media, you know, I traveled around and spoke to all the media about that. So I got to know some of those folks. And locally, we have one newspaper generally that covers my district, because I'm only in Washington County, which makes it easier. So there's not as much of a Pittsburgh influence as Allegheny County. So the Post-Gazette is not as big as the Observer-Reporter in my area. And the Observer-Reporter's housed in my legislative district, the county seat. And so between WJPA, our local radio station, and the Observer-Reporter, we've had a lot of good, candid, on and off the record discussions to talk about how we can make government better, but first and foremost, what we can do for our communities and things of that nature. So our local media is very community oriented, and it's, and I was very fortunate to have a good relationship with them. You know, we didn't always agree, and there were some times when, you know, they weren't giving me as much coverage as I thought that they should be. They're giving other people more coverage, but I think that's probably just part of the business. Our egos get in the way sometimes, but I had a really good relationship with them.
Can I ask you about the committees you were involved in?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy them? What were they?
Yeah, so I after my first term, and they saw how I could handle myself, especially bringing up Jerry Sandusky and filing some controversial amendments, and winning some amendments. Being in a minority and winning an amendment is a big deal, and winning them with like 106 votes. So that committee chairmen were asking me to be on their committee so that I can introduce amendments in committees. And so after my first term, I got great committees. I stayed on Ag, which I like, Judiciary, which I cycled on when Josh Shapiro left. So that was mid-first term. Josh Shapiro became county commissioner, and I took his seat on Judiciary. Consumer Affairs, Labor and Industry, and Energy, and Environmental Resources and Energy Committee. So those committees have been phenomenal in help educating me, giving us access to experts, and making me a better legislator. Our chairmen have done a pretty good job at getting us the information that we need to know. And the nice thing about being on these committees, you get access to a lot of good information that you normally wouldn't. And then being on these better, more high-profile committees, then it opens up to things like I was appointed to the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing. I was appointed to the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. So it helps you outside of the legislative work to get appointed to these important positions and make you, once again, a better legislator because you get access to so much great information.
Sure. And can I follow up with that, talking more about the amendment process?
Yeah.
Because you've been here in the minority for your entire career.
Yes.
So we'll talk a little about your legislation, but before that, could you explain a little more about why the amendment process is especially important to the minority party?
Yeah, so as they put it, the majority will have their way, the minority will have their say. And our say is generally through the amendment process. And so what I did my first probably 4 to 6 months in the legislature is I studied the process. I knew that if I knew the rules and the process better than anybody, I can navigate this to benefit my constituency and move pieces of legislation forward that you normally probably would not be able to do. And so I would tag bills. So if there was a bill on a certain title, for instance, say it's a Title 75 bill, motor vehicle, and I have a bill that would fit into that title, I would say any bill that comes out that is Title 75, attach my amendment. I don't care if it's relevant, germane, I don't care, attach it. I'll make the decision if I'm going to withdraw it when it comes to the floor. And if it was about my piece of legislation getting embedded in a bill, then I would just do that. Now, if it was about me trying to secure a guarantee that they're going to run one of my bills, I would take a piece of legislation and I would look at it. And I would carve out some exceptions that generally are impossible to vote against. And so it becomes a controversial amendment only because it's going to pass. And so then the other side is coming over to you and saying, hey, will you withdraw your amendment? And my response is, well, maybe. You know, I have a piece of legislation that is similar to this. Can you promise me that you will run my legislation, and then I will pull my amendment? And in a lot of ways, you know, I've had 3 bills get across the finish line. I've probably had, you know, 6 or 8 get out of the House. I just had one get out of the House today on my last day. 6 or 8 get out of the House, and it being in the minority, that I think is pretty impressive. But it was all because I sat back and learned the process. And they knew that I knew the rules and the process probably better than them, and I was going to use it to my advantage in terms of getting things done and trying to govern to help my constituency. And so I used the amendment process to really advance some really, in my opinion, some good causes, and try to make pieces of legislation better, or try to totally gut and replace legislation that I thought was not not good legislation.
And can you talk about the major pieces of legislation which you were involved, your role in getting them passed?
Yeah, so I wish I didn't have to talk about false claims. I wish that it was already passed and I would never have to talk about false claims again. False claims has been introduced since 1998. It's received 3 votes on the House floor, all unanimous. It is the biggest part of taxpayer fraud that we do not go after. And I took up the false claims in 2012 after Mike Gerber left. And I've been trying to eradicate this fraud out of our system, and I've been failing. So I hope that one day Pennsylvania catches up with the times and gets false claims. And false claims, if I say false claims, generally people don't know what that means. It goes back to Abraham Lincoln. It's technically Lincoln's Law. The federal government had a contract during the Civil War for ammunition and armory, and the person they had a contract with was paid but never delivered the services. So that's taxpayer fraud. And so that is what we're talking about, when people are being paid and not receiving services.
For a government contract?
Yes,
right.
In a fraudulent way. And so hopefully that will get, somebody other than me will have to get that done. But in terms of, I was able to honor 2 of our fallen officers in Washington County, David Dreyer and most recently Scott Basham. And so they'll forever be memorialized with interchanges and bridges named after them. And that was it's always an honor to be able to let their families know the communities will never forget about them. They were both, David Dreyer was assassinated on the side of the street from a crazed coward that shot him on a traffic stop. Scott Basham was shot during a domestic violence issue. The Dahlia Sabay was murdered. That was the perpetrator's boyfriend. She was pregnant, and he, from elevated level, shot and killed Scott Basham, injured one officer, another officer. So that's always, to be in a position to honor them is always rewarding. And I've had what I believe is a great piece of legislation that will help speed up the testing of rape kits. We had before my legislation, we had no idea what type of problem we had because it was not regulated. Mm-hmm. And we figured out that over 2,000 kits were sitting on shelves for over a year. And we become an issue, we become a problem for the rest of the country because most rapists are serial rapists and most rapists cross state lines. Mm-hmm. And so if we're not uploading the data that we have to CODIS, we are allowing more victims to be victimized and perpetrators to roam free. And so we're not where we need to be yet. There's still some nuances that we have to fix, but when you do a big reform bill like that, you expect to have to tweak it, and that's what we did today on the House floor. Hopefully it gets through the Senate. And so, we don't want any rape kits to sit and not allow victims to get justice and potentially be causing more people to become victims. And so we want every test to be tested, and equally as important, we want a conclusive result. Because a lot of DNA tests come back inconclusive because there is mixed DNA. Because when there is a rape, there's generally mixed DNA. And so the technology, I believe, is there to make sure that we can parse those DNAs out and get to the bad guy and put him behind bars.
Were there any memorable events during your during your term in the House, either political or social, that you'd like to talk about?
The one on the biggest compliment I got was actually from Sam Smith, Speaker of the House. He pulled me aside and said, I want to let you know that there have been a handful of times, probably count on one hand, on when the debate actually changed his mind. And he wanted me to let him know that the debate that I did changed his mind on an amendment, and it passed with the Speaker of the House's vote, which a minority member convincing the Speaker of the House to vote against I don't want to say vote against, but vote for an amendment when the maker of the bill is from his own side of the aisle, trying to get a piece of legislation done and against my amendment, it's a compliment. And so that was, Sam Smith is a great man, and I respect him a lot. He was very, very good to me in terms of, he never took anything personal, and if I got him on parliamentary inquiries, you know, he might let me know. You know, he probably didn't agree with me, but he said, I did a good job, things like that. You know, when I was a freshman legislator, and I did wanted to investigate the Jerry Sandusky stuff, it was fairly frightening for me. There were a lot. When you have a governor that disagrees with you, that is also controlling the Attorney General's office, because Linda Kelly was the Attorney General appointed before Kathleen Kane got elected. And you have these high-power people raining down on you because they don't like what you're doing. It can be very, very intimidating. And so I remember, and it made me a better legislator on how to navigate these waters in a positive way and make sure that you're not burning bridges, because especially when you're in the minority, you're not getting anything done on your own. I mean, you need the help of people of the majority party. And so I believe that I was able to navigate those waters and keep people like Sam Smith and others on the other side of the aisle, keep them in the loop on what I was actually trying to accomplish. And so it helped me become a better legislator, but it was pretty frightening there for a while. You know, I would get letters in my office that you would probably deem threatening, no return address, those types of things. And it was fairly frightening. And I'll never forget, my wife calls me. She has a 304 number because she's from West Virginia. And so she calls me, and it was the day that I did, and this is all conspiracy theory stuff, but it was the day that I did the resolution. And she kept trying to call me, my phone wouldn't ring, and then all of a sudden some guy answered and was asking her questions. And she said it was the weirdest thing ever. And I said, you know, I don't think that there was anything, it was probably just crossed lines, but probably a coincidence, but it makes you think, like, you know, what did I get myself into? But that was pretty frightening. In terms of my district, we have great senior fairs, or I get to talk to people. You know, we probably have one of the largest senior fairs. We team up with the county, so we have one of the largest senior fairs probably in the state. And you get to see everybody and hug everybody and, you know, take pictures with your constituents. The day-to-day stuff in the district and helping people has always been one of my favorite things. And having access, being able to go to like UPMC and seeing cutting edge technology and how they are doing stem cells, changing your stem cells into your organ and harvesting your own organ. You know, those memories, and being in school. So I try to teach in every single one of my high schools, or whatever school they want me to go to, twice a year. And so right now I have 4 school districts. I used to have 5. And I love going into schools and just talking to the students. Keep it totally nonpartisan. The only way they would know my party is if they looked it up, and just talk to them. And I really enjoyed interacting with that next generation and trying to get a feel for, you know, what their actual needs are, because we have a lot of people up here telling us what the next generation's needs are, but I want to see it. And my school districts have been great in allowing me to be in the schools and you know, educate the students a lot about state government and what goes on.
Can I ask you about your run for lieutenant governor in 2014? If you want to just give us a background of what made you decide to seek that office and what happened from your perspective?
Yeah, so I got my butt kicked, I know that much. And we knew that it was I don't want to say it was risky. nobody knows who lieutenant governor is. Once you lose the primary, nobody even remembers that you even ran for lieutenant governor. It's probably one of the most insignificant positions in the Commonwealth that I was going to try to transform in helping this current administration with the legislature. So one of the issues that I saw with Tom Corbett and somewhat with Tom Wolf is they came in with no legislative experience in terms of dealing with us and actually governing. And it doesn't matter if you're a one-party system, when Tom Corbett was here, or right now we have a divided government. It doesn't matter if you don't work with the legislature, you're not going to be able to get your agenda and be able to govern the way you want to. And you saw that in Tom Corbett, in some ways Tom Wolf, a slow start in legislative victories. And you're seeing it in the current administration in Washington, D.C. If you don't have those relationships, and more importantly, if you don't have the institutional knowledge on what makes a legislator, what drives a legislator, an individual, then it can be difficult to understand why certain things aren't moving and certain things are moving through the legislative process. And so I saw it as an opportunity for me personally. I was 32. I would have been the youngest statewide elected official in the country. It'll put me on a new platform to go around the country and be able to, advance a political career that, I'm more impatient than most. And so, two-term legislator, 32 years old, run for lieutenant governor, that does not, is not independently wealthy to run their own race. Most people would say that's insane, and they're probably right. But it was the greatest experience going around the Commonwealth, seeing these different districts, interacting with my colleagues in their district, seeing their political operations, meeting their people. I tell people, I've never been lied to so much in 1 year, and I've never made so many friends. And some of those friends lied to me. So it's like, it's just a phenomenal experience. You appreciate, one, how big Pennsylvania is, and two, how complicated politically Pennsylvania is. And geographic location was not to my advantage. I had Mark Kritz, who I would say is not from Western Pennsylvania, but if you're not from Western Pennsylvania, you say Cambria County's from Western Pennsylvania. So, if you're from the southeast, Cambria, anything west of the Susquehanna is Western Pennsylvania. And so I had, and he was a former congressman, good person. So I had him to compete with in Western Pennsylvania. And then I had Mike Stack, current lieutenant governor, the only person running from Philadelphia. So when you only have one person running from Philadelphia, when you're in a Democrat primary, who ran a good campaign and did a nice job being on TV and things of that nature, it's difficult for someone from Washington County to overcome all those issues. And I truly learned to appreciate the power of television and how 30-second commercial with somebody saying nothing except getting name recognition out there, especially for an office like lieutenant governor, who nobody can tell you even what the lieutenant governor does. The name recognition and the power of television and geographical location, especially, and it's different geographical location for the other side of the aisle, but as a Democrat, the majority of votes are in the southeast. And so we knew it was going to be an uphill battle. I'd do it all over again. Made so many great friends and really appreciated Pennsylvania and how complicated it is.
What aspect of your job as a House member did you enjoy the most?
So you break the job down into two. There's district work and then there's Harrisburg work, legislative work. I enjoyed debating. I enjoyed filing amendments. I enjoyed knowing the process and understanding complex pieces of legislation. So that was my favorite part here. back in the district, it's always been two things. One, interacting with people from my constituency, and two, access to things that I would never have access to unless I was a representative. Talking to these brilliant minds about separating DNA. I had a gentleman that he was a PhD, MD, PhD. Yeah, and he's trying to explain to me about how his algorithm parses these DNAs, and but just to have access to stuff like that, you know, meeting with these very intelligent people about STEM education at CMU and how they are targeting, you know, 3rd, 4th graders for particular mathematics, and meeting with people at UPMC and seeing their concussion protocol. And what their, you know, state-of-the-art technology is, you know, having access to that type. And I don't know if every rep takes advantage of that type of stuff, but going onto a Marcellus Well site and seeing how complex and difficult what they're doing, and trying to understand, you know, 8,000 feet underneath of us, we're drilling a mile out. Going to Mark West's facility, cryogenics, you know, things I will miss. Like I probably won't have access to the cracker plant after it's done. Like, come on, there's a couple of those in the country, and we have one in Western Pennsylvania. And it's awesome that we would be able to, that as a representative, I'd be able to experience what they actually do. And those connections end up meaning something. For instance, Caterpillar, which they had a room and pillar machine facility in our district. So I talked to Caterpillar, and now we have a Bots IQ tournament coming up where schools need sponsors, and then you connect the two. And now Caterpillar's working with Chartiers Houston School, sponsoring their Bots IQ, lending their shop to them to help build their machine. In addition to that, internships and shadowing opportunities for the next generation for these companies that I'm going to visit. You know, when you have that spider web of access, and you can help parlay that into not only helping me become a better legislator, but helping hopefully my constituents have equal access to that in some capacity, is an amazing opportunity.
What part of the job did you like the least?
Probably fundraising. Fundraising is not fun. So that's the campaign side, but you would calling people and asking them for money, and everything's expensive. I've been very fortunate in fundraising, and because I'm fortunate, I don't know if people really understand, in an off-year election, $30,000 to $35,000 a year, I just give right back to the community, and ad sponsorships, you name it, Little League teams, VFWs, it goes right back into the community. And so I tried to use the fundraising, which is generally a dirty term in politics, and use it to help my community. And it also obviously helped me politically, because then I'm sponsoring things. And but those ball clubs and you know, Canonsburg 4th of July parade, those types of things, it's worth it. I don't know. I mean, there's sometimes when you want to go to the grocery store or go to dinner with your wife, and you want to get a table for two, but you got to get a table for four because everyone's just coming up and talking to you, which I love. But you know, sometimes you just want to break away from that, especially from my wife. My wife is the best, and she has put up with me. She has put up with me being an elected official for a long time. Basically our whole relationship. So me going home is going to be very different, because now she's going to have to see me all the time. And she always says when I come home from Harrisburg, she's never seen someone mess up a house in 30 seconds. So, but she's a phenomenal person. So, you know, the worst part of the job is not being able to spend as much time with your family as you'd like. And that's part of the reason that we're here today, and I'm leaving and going to be a judge.
Yeah, you want to talk about that, your decision to run for the judgeship, and sort of just the thought process that went into that?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. I mean, I'm fairly well entrenched in my community, in my legislative seat. I believe that I could at least hopefully win a couple more terms if I wanted to. And I love it. Like, I enjoy being a legislator. And then you weigh the options, and once again, it's timing and opportunity. You don't know when the next judgeship will open up. Now, in terms of the actual position, as a judge, you get to hopefully help kids, families. Now, I'll start in family law immediately. It's you get to listen and help them immediately, which is a lot different than being a state rep. I mean, we get to help. We usually referring to somebody else to help them. But I think I'm hoping that I get to have a more direct impact on individuals' lives that I normally probably wouldn't see but for being a judge. And we have a next generation out there that is being impacted by all the decisions that I'm going to make, and unfortunately some bad decisions that maybe their parents made. And so I am looking forward to working with the system, making sure that the system works properly, and helping those individuals as much as possible and now that if I know the law needs changed, I know who to call up here to try to get the law changed. And so, but it also brings me home. There's no hiding the fact that I go from a 210-mile commute to a 6-mile commute. There's no hiding the fact that those 500 events I do a year, I will not be allowed to do most of them. There's no hiding the fact that on a Saturday, I'll be able to rake my leaves and cut my grass and spend time with my family. So there is a family aspect to it. My wife is actually 16, 17 weeks pregnant. So
congratulations.
Thank you. So she's due in May. So we're just starting a new chapter of our life, and really going from a 28-year-old kid that they called me to 36-year-old legislator. Now I'm the most senior legislator that lives in Washington County, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. I mean, we have a new senator, John Marr's more senior than me, but he lives in Allegheny County. But I feel like I've done a lot in the legislature, and there are still things that I would want to do, but I don't feel like I'm leaving anything on the table at this point. And my constituents and the people that have supported me, they supported me through this decision as well to run for judge. I won both sides in a primary. I was one of 5. I was the only known Democrat. So to win the Republican side and the Democrat side in today's environment, I think tells me that I made the right decision. And so voters have a way of confirming if you're doing things right or if you're doing things wrong. And so I believe I made the right decision, not only for Washington County, but for my family.
And do you have any particular thoughts on how you'd like your tenure as a state representative to be remembered here?
Somebody that was able to get things done in the minority, someone that the other side of the aisle could come to, or I could go to the other side of the aisle and work with any of them. I would like to hopefully be remembered as a kind and knowledgeable legislator here in Harrisburg. And I said this on the House floor yesterday, your name fades really quickly in this building. And I came to the realization of that very early on when I was sitting in the lounge and there were a group of legislators talking, and they were talking about the prior Speaker of the House, the one who just left. It might have been Keith McCall. And I looked at him and I said, do you guys want to know how insignificant we really are? I said, that Speaker of the House could be sitting on my lap right now and I wouldn't know who he was. And he had just left, and it's no mark against that Speaker of the House. It's just the nature of the institution and the process. Things move on. And so I am fully comfortable with that and understand that if there are any memories of me, I want them to be positive. Somebody that was, for good government, somebody that they could count on, and my word was good. Whenever you shake somebody's hand and you tell them you're for something or against something, that means something. And if you don't know, just say you don't know. It's not that difficult. And so I hope that people the ones that do remember me or mention me, say that his word was good, and he was someone that was honest in his beliefs, and someone that didn't take anything personal and try to get things done.
And we always let you have the last word. The representatives have the last word in our interviews. Do you have any advice as you leave for the House that you'd like to say? So
my advice to the House is realize how important Pennsylvania is as a whole. My comments on the House floor about our 203 puzzle pieces, that when you put them all together, create a Commonwealth. And Pennsylvania is too important to not have leadership. Pennsylvania is too important to not move things forward. If we were a country, we'd be a top 20th economy in the world. And we have everything from ports to natural resources to some of the best educational systems in the world. We have road infrastructure. And we have our issues that we need to improve on. But we have rivers. I mean, we are positioned very well to have a sustainable economy and be a leader in the world. So I hope that my advice to them is, when you erase all the lines of the 203 districts, you have a Commonwealth that is too important to forget about and put politics ahead of governing. And I know that it's easy for me to say this, and I know governing's not easy. It's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be difficult to pass a law because it's a law, and it's hard to repeal once it gets passed. But no, my other advice to members on both sides of the aisle: get to know the members on a personal basis. There's not enough. I'm not talking about bipartisanship in terms of legislative goals. I'm talking about there's not enough bipartisan friendships. They don't know each other. And so, and part of it is a leadership issue. It's not like we have mixers anymore where Democrats and Republicans are getting together just on a social basis to figure out who we actually are. And every legislator is an expert of their district. Learn about their district. And so it becomes a lot easier to work together and compromise on issues if you actually know the person. But it also becomes a lot easier to be against their issues and not take it personal if you know the person. And so I've been very fortunate to know a lot of members on the other side and my side of the aisle on a personal level. And if, for instance, I had a motion to adjourn right before Thanksgiving, it was the first motion to adjourn I've ever seen pass. And it was the first motion I've ever seen pass where the Speaker, the Majority Leader, and the Minority Leader voted no, and it still passed. And it was because I went over to my friends on the other side of the aisle and said, hey, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn. I'm going to need your vote. And they're like, absolutely, I'm with you. And everybody wanted to go home for Thanksgiving. Sure. So, but you can, don't take themselves too, people shouldn't take themselves too seriously. The first thing that Barry Stout taught me, that he said, once you realize that it is the seat that you're sitting in, the person's coming to see, not the person in the seat, you will realize that your name will fade away and you need to get over yourself. And so once you separate that, one, it helps you stay connected and grounded to your community, because your name will fade less quickly in your community than it will in the Capitol. And so it puts things in perspective that we all need to get over ourselves, stay connected to our communities, and figure out what actually the other legislators are like. Who are these people? And so, because you get firebrand speeches on the House floor, and you don't want that to brand a legislator. That doesn't tell you who that legislator is. And so I hope that for the future of Pennsylvania, that there is great leadership and there's more bipartisanship, not just in legislative goals, but just more bipartisanship in friendships and in learning other people's districts.
I think that's a nice place to end the interview.
All
Thank
right.
you so much
No
for
problem.
being here with us today.
No problem. Thank you. Really appreciate it.